Coming in at number 10, we have Justice League War. Now, even though DC hasn't been able to get their footing when it comes to live action superhero movies, they definitely have made some amazing films in the animated world. And Justice League War is a reimagining of how the Justice League is formed in the fight against Darkseid. This movie starts without any of the heroes knowing each other, so they do that classic thing when a bunch of heroes end up in the same place and no one knows each other. They fight. Now, in this fight, Superman really does own Batman. Everything that Batman tries to throw at him gets stuffed without even coming close to slowing Superman down. So why did I put it on this list? Well, the thing that brings the fight to the end is right before Superman is about to punch the Dark Knight into another dimension, Batman calls out Superman by his real name, Clark Kent, stopping him dead in his tracks. This is what makes Batman so incredible. In this rendition of the DC universe, he was the first person in the world to figure out who Superman was, and through his powerful intellect, he took complete control of the situation. He had that trump card in his pocket the whole fight. So one could argue that the entire time Batman looks like he's getting owned was just him studying Superman so he could learn how to fight him better. He could have called this out at any point. Also, there's a reason why I put this one at number 10. It's because he kind of does get beat up. Coming in at number 9 is Batman vs Superman. Even though this movie was a massive stinky egg, it still had a Batman vs Superman fight that ended with Clark Kent begging for his life and asking Batman to save his mom in the infamous Martha scene. I'm looking past how much this movie missed the mark to highlight the fact that Superman came into this fight very unprepared and Batman was the complete opposite. He had the kryptonite dust to turn Superman into basically a regular person, and he laid into him with some iron-plated right hooks. This all capped off with a kryptonite spear that left a nice slice wound in Superman's face. Imagine how this movie would have ended if their moms had different names. Coming in at number 8, we have New 52 Batman, number 36. One of my favorite things in the DC universe is when Batman is forced to take on a group of heroes, especially when it's the Justice League. It's always interesting to see how the writers will create new ways for Batman to earn his keep amongst the gods. In this issue, members of the League have been turned into crazed Joker versions of themselves, and one by one they go toe-to-toe with Batman, each one of them unable to beat the Bat. Batman is able to pull this off through a giant mech suit that he's created just for this special occasion that has a specific tactic to beat each one of these heroes. Now, when Superman shows up, the mech suit reveals that it has microscopic red suns in the fists that will drain Soup's powers while he gets his head caved in. But the Man of Steel blasts past these fists, he pulls Bats from the mech and starts flying him into space. Right when it seems like there's no hope for our caped crusader, he spits a wad of kryptonite gum into Superman's face, giving Bats the last-minute victory. This one wasn't a destruction of Superman, but he had to fight the main members of the League beforehand, so I'm gonna give him this one. And the gum was such a cool Batman trick.
Kitty Pryde has something of an advantage on Deadpool in that his attacks tend to require a target that's, tangible. If he can't actually hit her, he'll have a hard time beating her. On the other hand, her ability to change her tangibility would allow her to mess with Deadpool, similar to how she fought Wolverine in What If Astonishing X-Men. While she wouldn't really be able to kill him, it wouldn't be much trouble to incapacitate him. Unless he teleported away, in which case, yay, he ran away and she beat him. Plus, more recently, she phased through galaxies and transcended the multiverse, so she could probably figure out a way to beat some annoying guy in a suit. Number 6, Moonstone Ms. Marvel. This one may be a bit controversial because technically it was a supervillain acting as a superhero, but she actually tried to be heroic for a time, so I say it counts. Plus, it's a funny story. After Deadpool stole a bunch of telepathic babies from her, she chased him down. Luckily, Deadpool had his guns with him. Unluckily, he forgot she was bulletproof, and the rest of the fight didn't go so well. He latched onto her, but she realized she could just fly up and drop him, and she did, and Deadpool can't fly. He's really great at falling though, but yeah, when your abilities nullify a huge part of Deadpool's arsenal, read his guns, you have a pretty good chance of beating the guy. Number 5, KRYPTO the Superdog. I know it's kind of weird to include KRYPTO but not Superman, but hear me out. First of all, in all honesty, there's a good chance that Superman is just too fast and would beat Wade so easily it isn't even worth talking about. But also, Deadpool could have kryptonite weapons in his satchel, which could stop Superman from beating him. However, one thing that KRYPTO has that Superman doesn't is the cuteness of being a dog. Particularly after his time with Dogpool, I suspect Deadpool would be much less okay with fighting a dog than fighting Superman, and I think this reluctance could stop him from hurting KRYPTO, or at least make him pause long enough to let the dog have his way with him. This is an entry on the list that isn't based on any sort of history with them fighting, but was kind of a shower thought that I thought I should put in. Number 4, Thor. Thor. In Deadpool Annual number 1, Deadpool was after Daredevil while being bugged by Madcap. This was a fight that led to the epic Deadpool-Madcap combination, and it was not even close. Thor absolutely wiped the floor with Deadpool, which is understandable given that Thor is a freaking god who can create lightning bolts. And the worst part is, Thor wasn't even trying. Daredevil just said, lightning them, they're healing factor guys, and Thor went, as you wish, and zap, there they go. Kind of a cheap choice since Thor is obviously so much more powerful than Wade, but it's too clear a choice to leave out.
Coming in at number 3, we have Superman Red Sun, a one-off comic that runs with the idea of what if Superman landed in the Soviet Union instead of America. This comic is amazing, and one of the best parts is when Russian Batman puts a beat down on Superman. He lures Superman into a trap that has him surrounded by red sun lights, and then hits him with everything in the Krav Maga handbook. Superman actually almost dies in this fight, but then Wonder Woman swoops in to save the Blue Boy Scout from an early death, and then Batman actually commits suicide to avoid being caught. This would have probably been number 1 on the list if Batman didn't get help from Lex Luthor to pull off this plan. Coming in at number 2, we have The Dark Knight Strikes Again. This is the follow-up comic to the famous Dark Knight Returns, and I have to say, it's not as good, but it can be hard to follow up one of the best comics ever written. Well, in this comic, it has gone out that the Bat is back, and Superman goes to have a nice little chit chat with him. Also, if you don't know, in this universe, Batman, along with a lot of the other heroes, are very old, and Superman and Batman aren't anywhere close to friends anymore. So when Superman shows up at the Batcave, Batman unloads a wagon of whooping on him. He has a series of devices set up in the cave that are just there to take down Superman. Flash and Green Arrow are both there to give Batman a helping hand at putting Superman down, and this is all topped off with one of the coolest Superman beating tools ever, kryptonite gauntlets. This entire fight leaves Superman a bloody mess. And coming in at the number 1 spot is Injustice 2. So basically the same stuff is going on as Injustice 1, but this time we have even more heroes and villains, and Brainiac gets involved. Now I will say that there are 2 endings to this game. One of them has Superman win and merge with Brainiac to become one of the most powerful beings in the universe, and he makes Batman his slave. But I put this as number 1 because if you make the choice to have Batman win, then Superman is depowered and Batman leaves him locked away in the Phantom Zone with no powers. Pretty much the biggest way you can destroy Superman.
Number 10, Sentry. And the circle of people getting ripped in half continues. It's a vicious circle indeed, let me tell you. Sentry is often actually a perpetrator of this kind of gruesome and brutal death, but this time around he was on the receiving half of this murder method. This all went down during the King in Black event. When Null first arrived on Earth, Sentry was one of the first heroes to attempt to stand up against him and defeat him. Being the Sentry, he egotistically assumed he would easily be powerful enough to defeat Null. While Sentry tried to rip him in half, it was Null who managed to get a solid enough grip on Bob Reynolds to tear him asunder. Sentry would then be escorted by Valkyrie, aka Jane Foster, to the halls of Valhalla, and while on their way there, another shocking revelation would come to light. That some of the Valkyries were still alive, trapped, but alive, and upon being found by Jane and Sentry and freed, were able to kind of return once more. Pretty cool. It should be noted too that Sentry's death and defeat was also so shocking because it took place in issue number 1 of the King in Black series, in essence being one of the defeats that kicked off this event.
Elektra. You could say that Elektra was a victim of the well-known Daredevil villain Bullseye, but you could also say she was a victim of Frank Miller's gripping and at times very dark writing. In issue number 181 of Daredevil Volume 1, we watch Elektra and Bullseye square off in a bloody battle, which ultimately ends in Bullseye spearing Elektra right through the stomach and out her back. It's a really brutal event that changes Daredevil as a character entirely from that point on. And it's important to remember that in 1982, which is when that issue was released, a death like this for such a well-known hero wasn't quite as common as what we might be used to today. And it's not like she was resurrected again either, which is usually how this type of thing goes. She is completely done in the Daredevil timeline, only showing up in her own limited series and a couple other comics here and there.
Number 8, Batman. Although it doesn't seem surprising on paper, when Batman was seemingly killed by Darkseid, it caught a lot of folks off guard. That is because Batman is such a mainstay. He isn't a character that dies often, and definitely not in a way that feels as permanent as this if he does die. Although the idea of Batman being killed by Darkseid might not seem that surprising, because I mean Darkseid's pretty OP, Batman actually had a pretty decent plan for taking the villain out, and actually was successful using a Radion bullet. Batman successfully hit Darkseid in the chest, but not before before his Omega beams could do their work. Although it seemed as though Batman was obliterated as a result of being hit by the Omega beams, it turned out that what had actually happened was a power called the Omega Sanction, which is also kind of what Darkseid's Omega beams are. And those had been used to transport Batman back through time, so he would return, but not before having weird time travel adventures.
Coming in at number 7, we have The Dark Knight Returns. This is probably the most iconic Batman vs Superman fight, mostly because it takes place in one of the greatest comic books of all time. In this, we have Superman in a very weakened state from stopping a nuke from crashing into the United States, and Batman is in the most old geezer state we have seen him outside of Batman Beyond. Batman really pulls out all the stops in this fight. He has the classic robotic batsuit that was stolen for that garbage fire movie Batman vs Superman. He has help from his newest Robin sidekick. He blasts Superman with an entire city worth of electricity, and he has Green Arrow hit Superman with a special kryptonite dust that took millions of dollars to make. This leaves Superman human, with Batman busting his face before he fakes his own death. Now, if we go back and watch this fight, yes, Superman is holding back the whole time, so it's hard to say Batman destroys him, but this had to be part of Batman's plan. He knew Clark would pull his punches against an old man and an old friend, thus leaving him vulnerable to the kryptonite dust attack. And in the end, Batman wasn't looking to kill Superman, he just wanted to send a message, which he definitely did. Coming in at number 6, we have Armageddon 2001. Let's mess around with timelines a little. Armageddon 2001 is an alternate future where Supes has gone rogue and starts killing off heroes left, right, and center, along with destroying any military defense in the world that might fight against him. This means that the president has one guy to turn to, and it's good old Batman. Batman again uses a superpowered suit, but this time he has kryptonite on hand from the get-go and really beats down Superman until he's literally green from kryptonite poisoning. Coming in at number 5, we have Injustice, an alternate universe fighting game where DC Universe characters throw down in matchups that don't make any sense, but it's still cool as hell. Yeah, sign me up. Not only are these games made by NetherRealm Studios, the same people who make the fantastic Mortal Kombat games, but the games actually have some of the best story modes in a fighting game ever. The game takes place in an alternate universe where Superman has gone rogue after Lois Lane is killed by the Joker. This causes him to become a tyrant, which eventually leads to a clash between him and Batman, where Batman whoops his butt and then locks him away in a Red Sun prison. Coming in at number 4, we have the Tower of Babel. Once again, breaking into the world of Batman, playing out how he would beat down every member of the League. In this wonderful comic, these contingency plans for taking out separate members of the League get into the wrong hands, and the plan to take out Superman is a secret new kryptonite that Batman has created. The crazy thing is about this new kryptonite, it doesn't make Superman weaker, it actually makes him stronger. This new kryptonite that Batman has cooked up makes Superman's skin translucent. This makes his ability to absorb solar energy increase to the point where Superman can no longer control his powers and becomes a threat to everyone around him. Eventually, this leads to Superman going into hiding. Now, this isn't a straight up fight, but Batman's plan worked flawlessly and he for sure destroyed Superman.
At number 3 is Superman. Back in 1992, a comic book called The Death of Superman was published, in which Superman is actually killed by Doomsday. The battle rages on for quite a while against this hyper-adaptable villain, with Superman showing serious signs of exhaustion as Metropolis gets more and more damaged. This being a multi-issue publication, the actual death of Superman takes place in issue number 75, which is quite a while into the series. And while it's easy for us to find that issue online today, back then, readers were waiting months to see what happened to their favorite Kryptonian. I mean, with a title like that and leaving the event right to the end, I sort of rank this as more of a publicity stunt than anything else, but whether there is marketing involved or not, there's no doubt that this event was a shock to fans, who at the time were unsure if they'd ever see another Superman comic again. Thankfully though, but also sort of expectedly, DC then released Reign of the Supermen, which chronicled the return of the hero and is known to have sold just about the same number of copies as the death of Superman.
Number 2, Green Arrow. Green Arrow's death was quite startling because he was basically kind of the person behind it. Rather than do something, he sort of just let himself be killed and defeated. And I know there's probably going to be Oliver Queen fans in the comments. They're going to be like, no, he sacrificed himself. But look, it just seems a little silly to me, okay? While beaten by the enemy, he also just kind of gave up. This all went down when Oliver Queen was blown up by a bomb that threatened to detonate upon arriving in Metropolis. Rather than let that happen, happen or give up his arm, which was stuck in the detonator case or chamber, he decided to just surrender and sacrifice himself to save innocent people, allowing himself and the plane he was in to basically be blown up. The really crazy part of this story is that Superman was right there, and while he wasn't coming up with any amazing ideas, other than one that would cause Green Arrow to lose his arm in exchange for his life, which Green Arrow was definitely not willing to do, Soup still likely could have done something else that would save Metropolis and Ollie and likely have allowed him to keep his arm as well, because after all, this is Superman we're talking about. If only he'd had the time to think of something better. It is hard to think of things on the spot, especially when, you know, a bomb is about to explode, so fair enough.
Finally, at number 1, we have Peter Parker. I only don't call him Spider-Man in this entry because firstly, this is the Earth 1610 Peter Parker, and secondly because he's from the Ultimate Spider-Man series. And either way, the Spider-Man mantle is still very much alive, obviously. But this is still one of the most brutal and unexpected defeats for any superhero, partly because Peter Parker is still only a teenager in this issue where he meets his fate. That, and partly also because his final battle takes place right outside of his house in front of his friends and family. Facing off against the Sinister Six in a multi-issue battle, Peter is entirely helpless, getting ravaged over and over again by the group of villains, and no one really comes to his rescue, other than Aunt May, who actually takes out Electro with a revolver. Spanning between issues 156 and 160 of Ultimate Spider-Man, this loss takes its time and ends with deafening silence as Aunt May and MJ cry over Peter's dead body, and the series just ends. It's a rough defeat that some people forget about, maybe because it's not from our dimension, but hey, it's still a young Spider-Man dying at the hands of a huge gang of bad guys, no matter which way you splice it.
Number 10, Squirrel Girl. This one's a bit of a stretch because Deadpool didn't seem to be trying when the pair fought, but the fact remains that she did beat him. Plus, Squirrel Girl rocks, so it's going on the list. As we saw in Cable and Deadpool number 30, Squirrel Girl was able to scratch, whack, and otherwise pummel Deadpool into the ground. You may say, well, yeah, but Deadpool spent the whole time trying to figure out her name, and that's true. But hey, she was just exploiting one of Wade's major weaknesses, distractibility. Number 9, Moon Knight. Moon Knight is really cool, I'm a big old fan. And not only has he defeated Deadpool before, but he beat him 2 issues in a row in Vengeance of the Moon Knight number 7 and 8. Now, the first time was a bit less legit because Wade was distracted by a hot nurse, but issue 8 has a funhouse fight that proved much more clearly that Moon Knight can hold his own against the guy. Even in a house of mirrors, Moon Knight was able to slice and dice his way to victory. Number 8, Black Panther. Black Panther is a pretty great adversary to Deadpool for a few reasons. For one, he's an excellent fighter, both armed and unarmed. He also has a number of superhuman abilities like strength and agility, which would prove advantageous against the lesser abilities of Deadpool. Most importantly though, Black Panther has been proven to be able to mostly ignore the annoying ramblings of the Merc with a Mouth. He's shown that he can better Deadpool in combat, beating him up and chucking him out a window in Deadpool 15, and for that, he's going on the list.
Number 6, Tim Drake. Recently, Robin, Tim Drake, had a big glow up. He came out as bisexual and was celebrated in his very own Pride issue. However, even the fact that the character seems to be coming up more into his own and uplifted for his sense of identity could not protect him from an awful demise that was just around the corner. Enter Batman issue number 125. Here, Batman and Robin go up against Penguin and come face to face as well with Clayface. But what makes it even worse is while they were attempting to evacuate a charity gala whose attendees' lives Penguin was threatening, Robin got taken out by a goon with a gun. Just a goon with a gun. Ugh, brutal. While Robin would be stabilized, it was pretty shocking to see a character who had recently been so celebrated for identity and diversity taken out so easily and on the brink of life or death. Also, note to self, never attend a charity gala in Gotham. It pretty much never ends well.
Captain Marvel, or Marvel, the dude one. This is sort of a sad entry because he isn't defeated by any one villain, nor does he come back from it like some others may on this list. The culprit in this case is actually cancer. I don't know what happened in 1982, but this event was also published in 1982 like the ELEKTRA thing, and was actually known as the first graphic novel to be released by Marvel. It was called The Death of Captain Marvel, of course, and it chronicled the adventures of Mar-Vell venturing into a dark dimension where he's exposed to Compound 13, which is a nerve gas that gives him an incurable cancer. He's then visited by friends on the planet Titan, even getting a courtesy convoy sent over by the Skrulls, who pay their respects in his final moments. The craziest part about this is that Captain Marvel doesn't ever come back, save for one time when the Grandmaster brings him back briefly as a kind of ghost, but other than that, he's known to be out of the comics for good after this one. Sad.
Number 4. Captain Kate. One of the most shocking defeats and demises happened not really to just Kate, but also to Lockheed. Poor Lockheed. Not Lockheed, leave Lockheed alone. This all went down in volume 1 of Marauders from 2020. At the end of issue number 6, Kitty Pryde faces off with Sebastian Shaw, who, while considered to be a mutant who is allied with the nation of Krakoa, and so in that respect is technically a hero, I guess, has also a history of being a really nasty villain. And that is exactly what he was up to here. He kills Kate in cold blood by exploiting her weakness that at the time she struggled to phase through Krakoan organic material and gates. So he found some fast growing vine pods and unleashed them on her while trapping Lockheed in a net, which he then dropped into the sea, and then promptly sinking the boat she was aboard. One of the worst things about this too is Kate is even like, look, you can have all the seats on the Hellfire Trading Company. I don't care, just please let me save Lockheed. And Shaw's like, no. Considering that Kate was basically the main character of this series who possibly could not be resurrected, it was pretty shocking at the time. I was shocked. I was very shocked.
Number 3. Wolverine. Wolverine is a great adversary for Deadpool for a number of reasons. His regenerative abilities are comparable to those of Deadpool, he's as hot-headed as Deadpool is juvenile, and to top it off, Wolverine has a Muramasa blade that can counteract Deadpool's healing factor. Assuming Logan doesn't get himself blown up before he reaches Deadpool, he'd have a pretty good chance of beating him, and even killing him. Granted, Wolverine doesn't have the best track record against Deadpool, but I think he got kinda shafted in their fights. I believe in you, Logan. Number 2. Rogue. This one may come as something of a surprise to some of you, and to others it'll seem pretty obvious. Rogue, of course, has the ability to take the powers of other supers, and should she come in contact with Wade, which would be pretty easy considering the affection they share, she can take his powers from him, making him vulnerable to attacks. Granted, she probably wouldn't want to kill him and would have trouble if he was still immortal due to Thanos, but her power would definitely give her a significant edge against a depowered Deadpool. Some might be worried that his mental anguish might mess with her, but as we saw in Uncanny Avengers number 22, she can take it, referring to his mind as a palate cleanser after Red Skulls. Plus, honestly, even without taking his powers, with all Rogue's new powers, she could probably wipe the floor with them anyway. Number 1. The Hulk. When trying to think of heroes that could beat Deadpool, a good place to start is the heroes that Deadpool goes to when he wants to die, and the Hulk fits that bill perfectly. In Deadpool number 39, Deadpool was on the hunt for a way to die, and what better way than to be pulverized by a hulking mass of muscle. So he went to Bruce Banner and just annoyed him until Bruce punched him and made him straight up explode. One might argue that the fact that Deadpool was letting Hulk beat him disqualifies this one, but the fact that one punch could turn Wade into goo kinda shows that Banner could easily defeat him.